At the ripe age of 7 years old, dressed as a mischievous jester, I roamed the streets of my hometown with my older sister one Halloween night. Eventually, my sister's friends would join us, and we would all be reveling and participating in the laughter and the shrieks that were echoing through our neighborhood. The thrill of costumes, the taste of candy, and the sugar high it provided us to keep on keeping on. It's strange. I can recall both the good and the bad of this night. At this moment, I was having the best time, completely oblivious to what was going to happen next. As midnight approached, it was a bit more still in the neighborhood now. I was tired and I wanted to go home. I remember dragging behind my sister and her friends a bit. She was holding my candy for me, and I was trying to hold my eyes open. It was during this lull that I felt eyes watching me. Somehow, I knew someone was behind me. Probably just some kids, I thought to myself. I quickly turned around, but I saw what looked like a grown-up. I didn't see any kids with the person, and so for some reason, I started to pick up my pace a bit. I turned around, and there was no longer anyone there. I brushed off the unease as I got closer to my sister and her friends, convincing myself it was just the imaginative spirit of the holiday playing tricks on me. Before I knew it, I'd slowed my pace down again, and even worse, I'd let my guard down. Out of the shadows to my right, between two streetlights in an alleyway, emerged a figure. The man, tall and menacing. He wore a dark cloak. His cold eyes filled with a predatory glare. It set off alarm bells in my head, even at 7 years old. I tried to turn away, to escape his gaze, but my body felt frozen, trapped like a fly in a web. Before I could react, he lunged forward, his hands aiming to grasp me, to drag me into the abyss of the alley, I'm sure. He'd managed a hand over my mouth just in time to silence my initial scream. His hand smelled like an ashtray, and it was suffocating how much stronger he was than me. Within only a few moments, I felt myself being dragged further away from the street, further away from my sister. I would start to slip from his grip, and he'd sort of hike me back up, grunting and making horrible noises, before getting his grip back and continuing his sprint. Panic surged through my veins, and through what I can only assume was pure adrenaline, I found the strength to break free from his clutches. I remember my costume jingling like crazy as I sprinted through the seemingly endless maze of alleyways and deserted streets. I'm not sure where I was looking, but I heard my name being called, and damn it if it wasn't coming from behind me, the one place I didn't want to look. Only it was my sister's voice. Apparently, I'd just sprinted past not only my sister, but her whole group of friends. They were still on the street, standing where the man had initially pulled me in. Shock, fear, I don't know what it was, but I screamed for them to get away from there. My sister approached me urgently, and when she got to me, she held a hand to her mouth, quickly to hide her expression, and through her hand she asked if I was okay and what happened. By this time, I wasn't capable of forming words, only tears. She picked me up and carried me the rest of the way home. All of her friends followed. The only person I was willing to say anything to was my mom, and oh boy, I think my sister was kind of worried about that. That was the last year my sister was allowed to take me trick-or-treating. My parents weren't really punishing her so much as holding themselves accountable, I think. The real problem was the grown adult who was out there trying to snatch up children on Halloween night. I remember my mom being on the phone with the police. My parents were upset that it wasn't being taken more seriously. Probably just some kids playing a joke, ma'am. Even I knew this was no joke. When my mom would tell this story, she'd always get heated and mock the police with that line, just some kids playing a joke, wondering how many times they'd said that same line and how many times it was never just some dumb Halloween prank. still young, a mere 26 years old. I wouldn't describe this as a life-ruining decision, but it did change the course of my life for better or for worse. Senior year of high school, I'd managed to receive a volleyball scholarship to Albright College in Pennsylvania. I committed there junior year when a scout came out to one of our games. I may have let this go to my head a little bit, and my carefree attitude peaked in 12th grade. Halloween night, me and my friends had dressed like Charlie's Angels, and might I add, we looked awesome. I have auburn hair, so I was Drew Barrymore's character. My friend Tiff had bright blonde hair, and Lindsay went all out by dyeing her hair black. We also found matching rompers at Forever 21. Let's just say we looked pretty hot. Halloween was on a Friday that night. Our plan was to attend a party being held at our friend's house. Her name was Bora. Her family immigrated here from Albania at the end of our sophomore year. Her parents owned a restaurant in town. They were never home, and we had free rein to do whatever we wanted at her house. Mom and Dad had very different impressions of their daughter and the company that she surrounded herself with. None of our parents really knew the debauchery us girls would engage in. We got good grades, barely good enough to be eligible to stay on the team and for me to continue holding my scholarship, but good grades. But on the weekends, we would frequently engage in extracurricular activities, and Halloween was the perfect excuse to go all out. Lindsay had a prescription to Adderall, and the night would start with us crushing 3 lines and snorting them, off of Tiffany's English book, of course. We were walking to the party. Bora lived in the next neighborhood down the lane from Tiff. It was a walk that we'd made a million times before. The trip takes less than 15 minutes, give or take, depending on what path of intersecting cul-de-sacs you'd take. At the beginning of our walk, Tiff leads us towards the street that's essentially the longest route there. Me and Lindsay are like, no, let's go the usual way. But Tiff begs us, and her emotional investment to the directional options made us sympathetic to her groveling. A few feet down the sidewalk, I notice the streetlights are super spread apart, like bright spot, long stretch of pitch black, bright spot, long stretch of pitch black, so on and so forth. Then a spark of a Bic lighter indicated the idea that Tiff had. The houses that met the sidewalk were more like mansions. They were few and far between. Big 100-year-old houses, huge front yards with long driveway ending with iron gates. Some of the houses you couldn't even see from the road. 0 trick-or-treaters. Driveways were far too long for anyone to begin to endeavor. Very few of them even had decorations to entice trick-or-treaters. The ones that did simply had pumpkins in front of their gates. Even fewer pumpkins were actually carved. Tiff passed the joint to me and says, "Watch this." Me and Lindsay stop while she walks up to one of the iron gates and grabs a carved pumpkin. She turns around and smashes it on the ground like a DK barrel. We're like, holy shit, why? She replies by saying a speech like, "Listen, bitches, this might be our last Halloween together, but we're going to make some memories." Her call to arms inspires Lindsay, and after a couple of minutes of walking, we come across another carved pumpkin. This time, I watch as Lindsay runs over to it. She screams, "For the girls," then plants a soccer ball kick through the smiling face that someone had previously made on this pumpkin. We all celebrate as she runs back to the sidewalk. Our focus is on her, and we must not have seen the man on the other side of the gate. But when we were all together again, there's a man standing, pressing up against the iron bars of the gate, staring at us. We're speechless, all of us sick to our stomachs that we were caught. The light on the front of the gate barely illuminates his features. His expression looked old and mad. Countless wrinkles shadowed his face. He was short, with a horseshoe of long silver hair around his head, ending by his ears. He was wearing a dark knitted sweater, with a brighter button up under it, tucked into black pants. His eyes are wide, wide open. He had his lids pushed as far back as he could get them, just to silently glare at us. We all hush at once. His sudden appearance gave me a roller coaster feeling while I stood on the sidewalk. We all got hit with that fear, the primal fear every youth experiences when they get caught doing something bad. That type of fear, mixed with a notion that I shouldn't be worrying about my moral well-being, more so my physical well-being. It's an interesting cocktail. The way that he looked at us made me feel like prey. Along with that, I began to feel immense sadness, an overwhelming dread that finally possessed me to turn and run. Lindsay and Tiff followed right on my heels. We ran past 6 or 7 properties before stopping to catch our breath. Sharing a collective nervous laughter, we slow down and try to shake off the vibes of the prior situation. We touch ourselves up in Lindsay's makeup kit, standing under one of the few streetlights. Bora's house was one cul-de-sac over, and we worked too hard on our costumes to enter looking like sweaty Bettys. There's a handful of houses until we reach her street. We could hear the distant music that was serenading our drunk friends, but like a good best friend, Tiff stops us and extends her index finger at me and says, "Wait, you didn't do one for the girls." Both she and Lindsay begin to harangue me like we didn't almost get busted. They reassure me that the house is so far away now, then continue to press my commitment to our sisterhood. I give in. For the last time in my life, I give in to peer pressure of my friends, and the next carved pumpkin I see, I make a sprint for it. Preparing to boot the pumpkin to the moon, I scream, "For the girls," as loud as I can before booting this orange mass. But when my foot goes through it, I slip, and my leg slides under the bars of the property's gate. My right foot caught traction, sending my legs into splits. My upper half went forward, and I did a James Brown-looking thing that broke my leg into an L shape. My first thought, besides excruciating pain, was karma. Pretty soon, all 3 of us were screaming, and somehow, some way, my friends managed to get me to a house close by to call an ambulance. With one night of fun, I kind of completely lost it all. Naturally, I couldn't play volleyball, and therefore I was no longer eligible for my scholarship. But life goes on. I still ended up going to college. Of course, that's when the real horror story began. Student loans,